The show begins with a group of pirate soldiers firing fireworks from a ship as their commander orders them to keep firing after regular interval. They are awaiting someone when one of the soldiers tells the commander that the arrival might be late due to the calm winds. Meanwhile, on a smaller ship, our protagonist Nike Lemercier, who belongs to a royal family, is on her way to the Sun Kingdom. The oarsman spots the city lights and informs Nike about their arrival, who seems very enthusiastic about her visit to a new country. Before she gets off, she asks his accomplices to head back as their country might need the ship, but the oarsman protests as he has important business in the harbor, which is basically drinking rum and beer. As the ship docks, Nike jumps off the boat and says her goodbyes to her crew, stating that it is not their last meeting so they should stop crying. As the crew leaves with the ship, Nike takes her briefcase and prepares for her endeavors in the Sun Kingdom. She walks through a hustling market where two locals are chattering about an event that will start early in the morning and is delighted to see so many people at once. She stops by a fruit stall and gets astonished to see a variety of fruits that she has never seen before. The shopkeeper offers her one in a lot for 4 sun coins, and after calculating, she argues that it is too expensive. The shopkeeper shows disgust on his face, thinking Nike has a poor background, and asks him to leave. Just then, she gets bumped by a local and falls, and the whole crowd starts laughing at her. Later, she heads into a pub to have food and asks for a room to stay, but the owner refuses as he has no rooms left. The owner explains how the pubs have been swarmed by the National Army since yesterday, and that he cannot let an innocent-looking girl such as herself be loose in the drunken rabble. Disappointed and having nowhere to go, she leaves the pub and gets immediately swarmed by a couple of guys who ask her to stay in their inn. However, as soon as she lets her guard down, they push her down and run away with her briefcase. As soon as she gets up to chase them, she loses consciousness, mostly due to immense hunger. Later, she wakes up in bed next to a man and his daughters who ask her to eat as her stomach is constantly growling. After eating, she introduces herself as the princess and 4th daughter of Rain Dukedom, a place far east from the Sun Kingdom. She further says that she is here to get married to the Sun King, but the two believe she is joking and laugh at her. In a flashback, the ruler of Rain, Tedder Lemercier, reveals that the Sun King has ordered them to keep their principality autonomous, and the first daughter Mila thinks it is only because he is too lazy to conquer their kingdom. The second daughter Nia jokes about how they have only rain and peace, leaving their kingdom useless to conquer, and the third daughter Kara says that being poor has its own perks. However, the mood quickly shifts when Tedder reveals that Sun King has asked one of the daughters for marriage in exchange for autonomy. The sisters play rock, paper, scissors to determine who will marry the king and ultimately decide on Nike, who is not so enthusiastic about it. At present, 2 mysterious characters in a pub claim that Nike will be arriving at the shore tomorrow evening, not knowing that she is already in the county. They are assigned to escort her to the castle, but they secretly plan to overthrow the kingdom by kidnapping her during the escort. Meanwhile, in the same pub, the guys who stole from Nike are enjoying their drinks when one of them claims about low-value currency Nike had in her bag. They wonder what they should do with the cloth that they found in her bag when one officer approaches them and asks them what they are on about. Meanwhile, the next day, Nike borrows a dress from Mina and Lisa, and the 3 decide to head to the palace as it is a 3-day ride from their place. However, they are unable to get a caravan, so Nike decides to stay with Lisa until they do. Lisa tells her how the Sun King kicked out all the corrupt people from the government and stabilized the economy, and he is the reason why they are able to run their business without any trouble. She also mentions her mother, who passed away 4 years ago in a battle, and ever since, her father has worked day and night for them. Sometime later, the thieves from last night arrive at Nike's inn and kidnap Mina, mistaking her for Nike. It is evident that the soldier who met them last night ordered her kidnapping, but they have no idea they have the wrong person. However, they quickly learn that she is not Nike and decide to harass her for wasting their time. But before they could lay hands on her, Nike arrives with a grim look on her face and recites something, which not only breaks the kidnapper's knife but also sends him flying with a gust of wind. She arrives back at the inn with her stolen luggage alongside Mina and decides to leave for the palace, promising to visit again once she is in town. However, when she arrives at the palace, she gets restrained by the guards who think she is a local until she shows an official letter from the Rain Kingdom. Afterward, she is presented to the Sun King, who is a young boy named Livius I. Nike is surprised as she expected him to be an adult, and Livius immediately states how he called upon one of the daughters to make it rain with their abilities since the weather here is always dry. Nike is upset and starts scolding Livius as her whole life was disturbed just so he could feel the rain, and the guards step in to restrain her once again. Nike is put behind bars and made fun of for scolding the king, who gives her a choice: be his plaything or starve to death in this prison. Later, Livius discusses this with the elders, who state that it will cause a ruckus if Nike dies of starvation, but the king is certain that she will come around and become her plaything. Meanwhile, Nike is locked and hungry behind bars and recalls how Livius's eyes were not of a child despite his physical appearance. She then recites some spells and uses the wind to cut down the metal bars on the window, thus creating an escape route for herself. On the other hand, as the royal secretary Neil leaves Livius with food, Nike sneaks up behind him through the window and decides to teach him a lesson. However, she is unable to use her powers due to the immense hunger that she feels. Livius asks him to cause rain already, and she tells her how it is not child's play and requires a lot of preparation, effort, and time. Even though Livius says he will prepare everything for her, Nike requires feelings and experiences to use her magic. The feelings of the person seeking the rain must conform to the one making it, and Nike will also need to experience the beauty of the world around her if she is to make it rain. Just then, Neil arrives with the news of Nike's escape but is surprised to find her munching on Livius's dinner. In a flashback, Livius asks his mother Sheila about rain, and she reveals that the rain is drops of water falling from the sky. Even though she wants to see rain, their kingdom is too dry for it, but she claims she is happy as long as she has Livius. Meanwhile, Nike wakes up in her room and learns that she was dreaming about Shield and Livius. As she approaches the window in her room, wondering why she was dreaming about someone else, the maids enter her room claiming that they will take care of all her needs from here on out. They introduce themselves as Ranra, Sonia, and Mikia, but Nike is not so fond of it as she isn't used to having maids doing her chores. Later, as Livius awaits a rather extravagant breakfast for Nike, she arrives dressed in pink and scolds her for going overboard with her. Just then, she gets distracted by a purple-colored flower named Cape of Sharon, which only blooms in this color in the Sun Kingdom. However, her mood quickly shifts when Livius says they are just ordinary flowers, and she says that he owns the world, yet he never looked at it. Later at night, even when Neil warns him about the increasing rumors of enemy activity in their area, Livius can't help but reflect on Nike's words, who called her a waste. Meanwhile, while gazing at the stars, Nike wonders why she had to use such harsh words against Livius when she could have just let it go. She wonders why she feels sad and concludes that it is because she thinks of him and a younger brother whom she came to marry. Sweet Home Alabama. Just then, Livius arrives and says that he will never accept a sibling like her. He asks if the condition of making the caster experience the beauty of this world was a necessary condition for her magic to work, and she reveals that it is required to arrange the song that she recites. The caster takes inspiration from a country's climate, land, and scenery, which allows them to make adjustments to the basic melody and add in the rhymes. Just then, she sneezes, and Livius gives her his coat and asks him to visit the garden on the North Tower roof. She feels flattered and asks him to join her, and the two finally start getting along. However, even when Nike herself is enjoying simpler things in life, she can't help but wonder what made Livius so unhappy and uninterested in the beauty of this world. Just then, Nike notices an arrow being shot at the king and steps in to take fire. At night, it is revealed that her life is no longer in danger, but she has a high fever, and this attack was most likely caused by an enemy faction. Livius asks Neil not to be sad, as this incident has refreshed his will to conquer the world since it only exists to hurt people. Meanwhile, Nike once again wakes up from her dreams about Sheila and Livius. In the morning, the maids pester her and care for safety when she asks where Livius is. They reveal that martial law was declared in the capital due to the assassination attempt, and Livius is using this opportunity to crush the rebellious forces. A number of retainers have already been put on trial by the king himself, which shocks Nike as she declares to put an end to this cruelty. However, Neil arrives just then and informs her that she is to be sent back to her home kingdom on the orders of the king. Meanwhile, the rebellious general is being exiled from the country, but his subordinates ask him not to worry as they have already planned to overthrow Livius. On the other hand, Nike is frustrated about her departure and how rude Livius is when Neil gives her a little backstory. He explains how Sheila and Livius were born in a lower-class family and had no one else to rely on but each other. However, after Sheila got assassinated 3 years ago, Livius found it very difficult to fill the void in his heart. Even the act of conquering the world was a mere distraction from the pain of losing his mother, and this explains his mature eyes despite being a kid. Neil also reveals how sending her back is a precautionary measure, which reveals Livius's wish to protect her. However, her joy is cut short when the coachman stops the horse and reveals that the Sun King's castle has been set aflame by the corrupt generals. As Neil and Nike return to the castle, Livius escapes to the roof using a secret exit. Just then, the crowd hears a song coming from afar. It happens to be none other than Nike performing her rain ritual. She sings the song and causes the rain, which not only puts off the fire in the castle but also leaves a beautiful rainbow atop the Sun Kingdom. Sometime later, the maids are cleaning the castle while Livius watches from the outside. Just then, Nike arrives with Neil and complains about how she was being sent out. Livius asks her to leave if she wants to, but she claims that he still hasn't shown her the beauty of this world. Livius argues that she already made it rain and then states that it was underwhelming as it soaked his clothes and tasted funny just to annoy her. However, he claims he liked the bridge of light that appeared after the rain, which amuses her. He says Nike was desperate to show her skills, to which she takes offense and is about to leave. To her surprise, Livius pulls her towards him and kisses her, stating that she is going to make his life much more entertaining from now on. Nothing like being kissed by someone you think of as your brother. A week later, Nike is still in the Sun Kingdom and wakes up to find Livius half naked by her side. She is terrified and asks him why he is here, to which he replies that he is only here because his room got burned during the fire. Yeah, right. He then makes a comment on her breasts being small, which results in her smacking him in the head. At the breakfast table, Livius says that blasphemy like this is normally punishable by death, but Nike is unhinged, is still angry at him. Livius then mentions a welcome party for her, and Neil explains that it is a tradition to formally introduce the queen to the ambassadors of the allied countries. Livius wants her to entertain the guests using her rain abilities, but she bluntly refuses as he is merely putting her dignity at stake. She claims that she only did it earlier in case of emergency. And since it is a sacred ritual, it is absurd for her to perform it just to entertain other people. The two start arguing, and it gets so intense that the guards step to separate the two. Later, the elders discuss the people who were found guilty of rebellion and ask Livius why he did not give severe punishment to them. Livius says that doing so will only put more targets on his back, and the elders suspect that this thought has been planted onto the king by Princess Nike. Livius mentions that Nike has been put under strict training to learn some manners for being the Sun King's first wife, who on the other hand is exhausted and wonders how she ended up in this mess. As she falls asleep, she wonders if Livius will ever open up to her and tell her how much pain his heart is in. As she dozes off, we see Livius opening up her bedroom door and walking inside her room. The next morning, the maids tell her that Livius has already left for work and explain her busy schedule, claiming that the young king never gets a moment of relief. Meanwhile, in the North Tower garden, Neil states to Nike how Livius always overworks himself without caring much for his health, which worries him sometimes. However, Livius always tells him that the more work he does, the less he has to think about unnecessary things. Just then, they get interrupted by Duke Ferrara, the Minister of State, who introduces her to the ambassador of the Ocean Kingdom. He, with a smirk on his face, mocks her for being Livius's plaything. While he continues to insult her, Livius arrives just in time and claims that she is much better than the rest of them, who have nothing better to do than spew the most predictable of flattery. He then warns them to run their mouth wisely as they are speaking to the wife of the Sun King. Later, while he rests in her lap, Livius tells Nike how the bright sun bothers him a lot. He politely asks him to make it rain, prompting her to ask if he now enjoys it. He tells her he barely knows anything about himself, but the rain washes away his malice, if only for a while. But it also makes him remember things he does not want to remember. Nike suggests he leaves the kingdom matters to the seniors for a while, but Livius's mood immediately changes, and he tells her not to meddle in country affairs. Later, Nike recalls the teachings of her grandmother, who taught her the art of making it rain. Her thought gets interrupted by the maids, whom she thanks for putting flowers into her vase. However, the maids tell her that the king himself handpicks these flowers every day for her, and that he had asked them to keep it a secret for Nike. At night, Nike visits his room to see him dozed off, only to get startled by Neil, who says Livius did not join her because of how she acted in the afternoon. He shows him a sleeping medicine that Livius had been taking ever since his mother died. But now he has suddenly stopped because he is able to relax around her. Having someone to protect has put his mind at peace, and Nike finally understands how he feels. She declares that she will protect him too. And on the next day at the welcome party, she starts singing just as Livius had asked him to. Just then, she arrives on the stage dressed all royal, and her beauty stuns everyone in the crowd. She thanks everyone for coming to see her and causes it to rain outside, which surprises everyone as they have never seen a rain so pretty before. Later, Livius thanks him for doing it for him, and it is evident that Nike has totally fallen in love with the little king. However, their quarrels and arguments have not stopped at all. Sometime later, Livius is getting his painting done by a professional while Nike is trying on different dresses for the engagement ceremony. The designer orders the maid to remove all carbs from Nike's diet since she needs to lose 5 kilograms before the engagement. Afterward, the elders state that Livius's presentation to the citizens is coming up, and he states that everything will go as planned if nothing suspicious comes up. His suspicions are placed right as someone else is planning something unexpected. Back at the castle, Jaina, the head chef, secretly offers her some carb-rich food, but the designer, who is constantly keeping a watch on her, stops her and gives her a lecture for going of course. Just then, Neil walks in with worry on his face and asks Nike to accompany her to Livius's office. There, Livius tells her that their engagement has been called off by the Ministry of the Priesthood. Neil explains that the Ministry of Priesthood is so powerful in the government that even the Sun King needs their approval to perform any kind of ceremony. The group has refused to approve Livius's marriage to Nike because she belongs to a foreign ethnic group. This infuriates Livius, as there have been other lawful wives belonging to different ethnic groups, and they are doing this to him only because of personal grudge. Neil explains how the minister was degraded when Livius first took the throne, and they told him that Nike will have to perform the rite of illumination if they were to accept her. The rite involves retrieving a special ring in an underground temple, which is the most perilous place in the entire country, located in the depth of a dangerous valley. This temple has consumed the lives of dozens of princesses, and this is why the custom fell into decline 2 regions ago. Nike wants to perform the ritual, but Neil states that accepting his offer would also mean accepting the fact that Nike is an outsider. Besides, there are other forces that feel ill toward the king, and Nike will have to face all of them if she wants to accept the ritual. Livius is determined to stand his ground and protect Nike, who on the other hand is not so fond of being a burden. The night falls, and Livius in a flashback receives a ring of protection from his mother, who tells him to give it to someone whom he loves, and he asks her to take it because he can never love someone as much as he loves her. In the morning, Nike inquires about the temple that Neil mentioned last night, and Ranra tells her that not even the royal family can enter it without permission, although maids like her can enter without hesitation, prompting Nike to dress up as one. She walks into the temple without any trouble and immediately notices one of the priests scolding another maid who broke a vase. Before he could strike her, Nike steps in to rescue her, and everyone is shocked to see her powers. Just then, the high priest Ronnie Aris arrives and apologizes for the rudeness of his subordinate, which surprises her as she expected him to be bold and upfront. Her expectations are met when Aris immediately tells her that clouds are ill-omened things that cover the sun, meaning that Nike is an ill omen in their kingdom. He further says how the last king made the same mistake of marrying a woman of foreign ethnicity even when people warned him. Yet he persisted, and the child born from that woman is defiling the throne and ruining the country. Aris believes Livius does not deserve the throne to begin with, which infuriates Nike, but the maid restrains her by saying that she will lose her position if she lays a hand on a priest. As he leaves, Nike sheds tears thinking of all the pain Livius has gone through, and because she might not be able to marry him. After this heartbreaking encounter, the maid takes Nike to a cottage that houses refugees from other ethnicities. There, a little girl greets her and also reveals that the king himself paid them a visit. She asked him if he liked flowers, and he told her that it reminded him of his queen, which amazes Nike. Not only flowers, but the wind, sun, trees, and everything that moves reminds Livius of her, and he is finally able to see the beauty of this world because of her. Later, she returns to a sleeping Livius and covers her bed with flowers that the kids from the orphanage sent for him. She then tells him about her plans to perform the rite of illumination and manages to convince Livius of her loving attitude. Before she leaves, Livius gives him the ring of protection he received from his mother and asks her to wear it around her neck. As she enters the temple, Aris tells her the goal is to retrieve the ring and return by morning. The door is shut behind her and she carries a torch inside to navigate through the maze. Inside, she realizes that she won't be able to call upon the wind if someone goes wrong, and his survival instincts are all she has left. After almost falling through a cliff, she navigates her way around the place and finally manages to locate the sun god temple, which holds the ring she is after. She enters the temple and locates the ring box. But when she opens it, she learns that it was all a setup to rid her once and for all. She cannot fight the swordsman without using her wind, so she blows out the torch and makes a run for it in the dark. However, she gets restrained by someone who is not part of the swordsmen who are after her. The abductor happens to be none other than Livius, who smelled something fishy and used the secret royal entrance to enter the maze. Nike states that he never really trusted her with the trail, and that is why he came to rescue her. But in fact, he is well aware of men and their schemes, and he just wanted to lend a helping hand to her. It is evident that this ritual has no real purpose and is only used to assassinate the princesses that the priests do not like. Just then, Nike notices their feet submerged in water and uses her ability to cover the whole maze with fog. The two use the fog as a smoke screen and make their way out of the temple. But before they can take a breather, Nike gets attacked by one of the assassins. The two barely manage to escape, but their problems are only starting since Aristes will not be informed about Livius's actions. As they are paddling their feet, Nike asks him to slow down as she dropped half of the ring during the attack, but quickly learns that Livius does not care about it at all. He embraces her with tears and reveals that he was terrified of losing her too, and that is why he could not stay there any longer. He further reveals how the throne in this kingdom meant nothing to him and all he wanted to have is her. Nike apologizes for focusing on things that didn't matter and states that she got blinded by his usual calm and lucidity unsuited to his age. However, she finally understands that it was all a mask to cover the pain and loneliness he has felt ever since the passing of his mother. As the sun rises on the two, Nike kisses Livius on the forehead to stop him from trembling and asks her to worry about throwing away the kingdom, as the future is uncertain and could lead them anywhere. She further asks him to envision a brighter future, which his mother used to tell him as well. He gets up with a renowned vision for his kingdom, but their problems don't end there as they still have to attend the ceremony. Livius states that no harm can come to them if they are together. Back in the castle, Neil mentions the three elders who are referred to as the voices of the four gods. First is Lord Graham, the god of tactics who led the famous Zeus Island invasion without any casualties. Next is Lord Allen, the god of weapons, whose blasting powder formula is still unreplicable to this day. And lastly, Lord Vincent is a man who has connections all over the world. and all factions, whether it be good or evil, show respect to him. Together with the king, these three men make up the voices of four gods, and the decision they make must be accepted by every man in this kingdom. They were the ones who turned the festivals over to the priesthood, so they have more than enough power to turn them down. Later, it is revealed that the high priest has been indisposed and the ceremony has been handed over to Ronnie Leard, who will commence the engagement ceremony. However, since Nike was unable to retrieve the ring from the temple, Leard asks if she wishes to give up on the wedding. Nike refuses to give up, and Livius says that a rusty old ring from a temple underground is unworthy of the man who has conquered the world. Instead, he wants Livius to put a ring around the sun and asks the people if they want to see it. Everyone is eagerly waiting for the princess to show her powers until she starts singing and uses her powers to begin the process. In a flashback, Nike learns that Livius had read about this phenomenon in an old document, and Nike refers to the ring as a halo, which often occurs when the rain is about to fall. It is also referred to as the white rainbow, yet Nike is unsure if she can make one or not. Besides, there is no guarantee that people will be convinced, but Livius reveals that his whole purpose is to shake them up. When Nike creates a halo around the sun, the whole crowd, including Aristes and Leard, are stunned, but the swordsman who attacked Nike starts yelling out how this is all a scam and the king aided Nike in the temple. Aristes runs it to shut his mouth, but it is already too late as people have taken notice of his words. Livius uses this opportunity to reveal that he indeed entered the temple and broke the law just so he could stop the assassination of Nike. Being caught red-handed, Aristes acknowledges the claims and reveals that he planned this on his own and the ministry of the priesthood had nothing to do with this scheme. He claims that the king brought disgrace to the sun god by putting restrictions on the priests. But Leard has nothing to do with traitors. Just then, Nike steps up on behalf of the king and punches him in the face, followed by sentencing him to a degree less than death. The elders from afar watch and are amused by the turn of events, while Aristes is surprised to see that the king has matured so much. After the ceremony, Nike states how they were unable to find the ring for their engagement, but Livius asks her to make a rainbow and uses it to complete the ring. Some time has passed since the incident, and Princess Nike uses her rain summoning skills from time to time to help farmers grow their crops. She likes to tend to them personally to ask about the crops, but the king isn't fond of her walking outside the castle alone, so he fires blank cannon charges to call upon her. Meanwhile, a mysterious cloaked person has entered the kingdom and is spying on the princesses. Nike returns to the castle and argues with Livius for calling her with a cannon fire while he jokes about having an ill-mannered wife. Neil scolds her for not showing enough respect to the Sun King and for missing out on her etiquette lessons, but Livius again mocks her by saying that they should give up on teaching her etiquette. He asks Nike to address her by name since it is more affectionate, but the moment is interrupted by a girl named Luna who was the same person spying on Nike. She says she left her escorts behind since they were too slow and runs in to embrace Livius, making Nike wonder what her relationship is with Livius. Later, Neil introduces her as the first royal daughter of the Ocean Kingdom, Princess Amaluna Israel. Luna and Livius have been close friends since their childhood, and now Luna has started calling herself Livius's fiancé, which clearly bothers him. Livius introduces Nike as her real fiancé, but quickly learns that Luna has a deep grudge against her for stealing her potential husband. Luna is upset and states that she will not leave this palace until she sends Nike back with tears. Luna spends the next few days trying to demean Nike, who is unable to match her skills in etiquettes, ancient reading, and playing instruments. Livius does not want to meddle in women's matters, but worries for Luna since he hasn't heard from her in a while. He recalls how she used to bake him cookies when he was alone in the castle and states that it made him happy back then. However, just as Livius is about to settle in with his wife, Luna pops out of nowhere and ruins their night. The next day, while practicing dance, Neil tells Nike that she is being humiliated only because she neglects her training, and Nike expresses her desire to become a match to Luna if only a little. Just then, Luna arrives and asks Livius for a dance. And as the crowd gathers to appreciate their coordination, Nike leaves the hall all jealous and frustrated. Luna follows her into the hallway, and while Neil eavesdrops on the two, she states that marrying her would only bring shame to the king, so she should step down. This breaks Nike's heart, and she spends the rest of the day alone. Even when Livius finds her and checks up on her, she decides not to talk about anything and heads to her room early. In a flashback, Luna is impressed with Livius's skill and wishes for him to become the king. Hence, she offers him to marry her so he can get a good starting position in the government. Livius doesn't care about power and only wants to take his mother out of the castle when he grows up so they can live their lives with no ties to the kingdom. However, when Sheila was assassinated, Livius immediately became the next Sun King, and his calm persona turned into a grim and evil presence which horrified Luna for the longest time. At night, Nike is practicing dance moves all alone when Livius brings her a cup of lava cider, a drink that relieves exhaustion. He then states that no matter how many people tell him that Nike isn't suitable to be the queen, he is never letting her go as she is the only person who can give him what he needs. This puts a gentle smile on her face, and the two start dancing in the middle of the night. Luna spies on the duo dancing and realizes that Livius is truly happy with Nike, which makes her grudge even stronger. She challenges Nike to a formal duel the very next day in a death horse race to a cliff, but Livius protests because it is too dangerous. However, Nike steps in and accepts the challenge and states that she has no intention of conceding her place in Livius's side. She has renowned confidence after the words of reassurance from Livius and exclaims her love for the king during the race, which surprises Luna and causes her to fall off the cliff in the river. During her fall, she recalls how she became distant from Livius because his new personality terrified her and how she always hated herself for that. But when she heard about him getting married, she couldn't help but visit him in hopes of starting over. On the other hand, there is Nike, who loved Livius even when she couldn't, and as Nike saves her from falling, she realizes that she is no match for her. After she has recovered, she decides to head home because she lost the race, yet he thanks Nike for saving her life. She promises to repay the favor someday, but continues to have a grudge against her since Livius chose Nike over her. With tears falling down her cheeks, she asks Nike to make it rain so Livius can't tell if she is crying when she says her goodbye. As the rain falls from the sky, Luna can't help but admit that Nike makes the world much more beautiful than it already is. A few days later, Nike is punished by Neil for leaving the castle walls once again when she claims that she only went out to get something nice for Livius. She pulls out a basket of fresh-picked fruits and addresses Livius by his nickname Livy. Livy embraces her in affection, causing her to blush in embarrassment. Sometime later, Nike is busy learning etiquette to become a queen, and her day starts with a number of lessons ranging from dancing to reading to table manners and much more. Despite being exhausted from overworking herself, she puts up a strong front and continuously wears a smile on her face. One day as she wakes up in her bed, she gets a surprise visit from Livius, who brings her flowers and suggests that they ditch lessons today and spend time together. He takes her to the festival for the planting season, which is filled with new purpose and joy. She plays a dart game which is surprisingly good at and wins all the prizes. As she exclaims her joy, she turns her attention to Livius, who is dressed as a woman so people don't recognize him. Livius is clearly frustrated at his new attire, but Nike plays it cool by stating that she always wanted a younger sister. As they quarrel on the street, a blonde guy with a mysterious persona watches over them from a coffee shop. Nike gets the feeling of being watched, but gets diverted when she finds the same two thieves she came across on her first night at the Sun Kingdom. The thieves have stolen money from a young boy, and Nike scolds them for staying on their dirty path despite getting beaten up by her. They beg for her mercy, and she lets them off with a final warning, followed by returning the money back to the young boy. After questioning, she learns that the boy has 7 brothers and decides to give them the presents she won earlier. Later, as the two engage in the spring dance, the blonde guy watches them from afar, wondering how Nike managed to win over not only the locals but also Livius. At night, both Livius and Nike are terrified to enter the office, thinking that they will get scolded by Neil for ditching their duties today. However, they are surprised to see the same blonde guy sitting on Livius's chair. He confidently approaches and kisses Nike as a greeting, but Livius takes offense to it and asks him why he has returned, which clearly states that the two already know about each other. The man is Livius's uncle, who says that he only visited to congratulate him on his engagement. The man is named Bardwin, and even Neil is shocked to see him in the castle. However, Livius scolds him for letting Bard in the castle, but he actually had no idea how and when he came. Bard reveals that the maids let him through, who then apologizes for their action as they thought the king was already aware of Bard's visit. Neil then reveals that Bard is the younger brother of the previous Sun King and served as the prime minister in his reign. Livius reveals that Bard abandoned his role and disappeared one day and states that he did so because he does not like to be constrained. Bard tries to flirt with Nike and says that he has never met a woman of such glamour in all her travels and continues spitting compliments for her while Livius tries his best to put an end to his foolery. Bard says he is experienced with women as opposed to Livius, who is a virgin, and claims that it will be a lot more fun being with him, but Neil sternly asks him to stop and the mood quickly shifts in the office. As he leaves the room, Livius strictly tells Nike to never let her guard down around Bard or she will be sent to prison. Later, the elders discuss the situation between Livius and Bard and state that Livius is merely a child. Nike, on the other hand, is furious about what Livius said earlier, but recalls how he was acting much differently than usual. Meanwhile, Bard is showing his charms using his archery skills and has gathered a whole crowd of women around him. Nike wonders why Livius hates Bard when the maid tells him they were always side by side and figures that it may be because Bard excels in every field. He also wonders why he settled for the role of a minister when he was suited to be king. And Livius arrives just then and says that it is because Bard isn't trustworthy. Afterward, Livius tries to overshadow Bard by showing his own archery skills but fails miserably. Just then, Bard reveals that a noble lady named Larissa is holding a banquet to celebrate his return and asks the two to join it. Later, in the banquet, Livius is jealous of Bard's social skills and decides to leave the celebration alongside Nike, who on her way gets interrupted by Bard. He asks her to help him lose the ladies that are after him and picks up Nike in her arms, claiming that she is feeling dizzy and needs to be taken somewhere cooler. Meanwhile, Livius is waiting for her to join him and decides to check up on her inside the hall, only to learn that Bard has picked her up and has run off. Meanwhile, Bard carries her to a room despite her attempts to free herself and asks her to put Livius at the side as he can please her far better than him. He then states that he has fallen in love with her, but Nike immediately calls her bluff and asks him why he is doing all of this. She then learns that it was all an act by Bard to figure out if she is really worthy of marrying the king, and all this time he was just looking out for Levi. However, the moment is ruined when Livius storms into the room with guards and finds the two in bed. He accuses the two of adultery and asks the guards to put Bard in prison. With a grim look on his face, he orders that Nike must be locked inside her room at all times and threatens to burn her homeland if she does not abide. Sometime later, Livius visits Nike's room and the two start fighting until he apologizes for being too hard on her. However, the arguing doesn't stop even after that because Livius thinks something happened between her and Bard. Nike asks him why he acts so strange around him when he's usually so calm, but Livius refuses to answer and leaves the room, leaving her wondering what to do next. Before leaving, he removes the guards from her door since there is no way they can stop her if she decides to leave the room. Neil then informs him that the elders have summoned him in an emergency, making him wonder what they are planning. Meanwhile, inside the prison cell, Bard recalls his conversation with Sheila. She was the only one who saw Bard's true nature and figured that all the glamorous act was only so he could hide the pain inside his heart. She points to the moon and says he is just like it, and due to her considerate nature, he fell in love with her and even expressed his feelings. While he's busy in his thoughts, Nike sneaks up to his cell and opens up a way for him to escape. On their way out, Nike is amazed by the beauty of the full moon, which takes Bard back to the time when he expressed his love for Sheila. He refuses to look at it and says that it brings out a painful memory, so Nike uses her powers to cover it with the clouds. Nike then confirms if he came here because he cared about his nephew, which prompts him to tell his side of the story. He reveals that both Livius and he wanted to protect the same person. But after Sheila got assassinated, they could not forgive themselves. However, after they conquered the world, it was Bard who could not face Livius due to his failures and ran away to suppress his pain. However, hearing about his marriage piqued his curiosity and he decided to pay a visit to see the woman first. He had his doubts about Nike, which were washed away because of her kind and generous character. And Bard asks him to always have his nephews back because he needs someone like her in his life. He states that it is time for him to hit the road again, which upsets Nike, and she urges him to express his feelings to Livius, but he refuses, claiming Livius will never allow such a thing. Sometime later, Neil arrives in the hallway looking for Nike, who is still determined to break the tension between Livius and Bard. Meanwhile, Bard dreams about the time when Livius had asked him to be his right-hand man after conquering the world and recalls how it was the only time he saw his nephew cry. He wakes up beside Larissa but gets interrupted by her younger sister, who claims there is a visitor who has come for the Playboy bar. The man on the door is Neil, who states there is something important he needs to discuss. Back at the castle, Nike is trying to convince Livius to take some time off his busy schedule to hang out with her in the city. He in turn asks why he let Bard escape from the prison and then states that he does not care where he goes or what he does. Nike states that she is aware of his regret and asks him to meet behind the palace before leaving the room. As he walks into the pavilion looking for Nike, he sees that Bard has been led there by Neil and tries to march out because he has no intention of talking to him. However, Nike causes it to rain, so the two get to spend some time together and fix their issues. Inside, Bard figures it was all Nike's plan to get them to talk and decides to have a conversation with Livius. Bard reveals that after Sheila's death, all he wanted to do was protect Livius, and to do so, he gave him the throne and removed all their enemies until eventually, they conquered the whole world. However, even after doing so, he couldn't feel at peace because Livius had become a child full of hatred who became blind to the beauty of this world. He could not face what his actions did to Livius and decided to run away. But that wasn't the only reason. Bard wanted to see if the world Sheila lived in was not merely full of sorrow and desired to heal himself from all the pain during his travel. However, Livius is still upset because Bard left him all alone and wants to leave the pavilion. The two have been talking for nearly an hour and are surprised that Nike is still making it rain heavily, only so they get to forgive each other and get along. They run outside to check up on her and find her dried up and exhausted from using so much of her power. Nike, even when struggling to speak, asks Livius if he spoke about his feelings with Bard, which makes him realize that Bard is too precious to lose. He then reinstates him as the Prime Minister of the Sun Kingdom and requests him to stay and work with him. Bard takes a bow to his king and promises to build the world he desires, and seeing the matter resolved, Nike falls unconscious from exhaustion. Sometime later, she wakes up in her bedroom with Livius by his side, who has fallen asleep next to her. Bard arrives just then and tells her that Livius has been by her side all this time. Once again, just to annoy Livius, Bard starts flirting with Nike, who immediately wakes up and the two start fighting again. A few days pass, and a trade conference is held in the kingdom which all the prime ministers and ambassadors have joined. However, the meeting list is so large that everyone is exhausted at this point. Livius suggests to Nike that they should take a trip after they're finished and mentions a health resort in the south that fills them with renowned enthusiasm. A little later, Neil strictly tells Nike to call the rain in the opening ceremony of the conference and orders her to get it right as a lot is at stake. As she is contemplating, she receives a letter from his home kingdom which shocks her. When the maids ask her what the letter says, she lies about it and states that his family was only checking up on her. Afterward, she surprises the whole conference with her rain summoning, but Livius judgmentally claims that her tone was off and the rain was not as good as it is normally. He immediately asks her what she is hiding, and she reveals that she received a letter from her family mentioning that her grandmother is really sick and wants to see her right away. Livius asks Neil to cancel all of her appointments and asks him to arrange her travel luggage. Neil says he will get it done in 3 days, and Nike is flattered that he is letting her go. However, everyone gets shocked when Livius states that he will join her to visit her grandmother. Neil and Bard oppose the idea as he has a lot of things to attend to, but Livius claims it will be alright since he has instated a responsible prime minister. On their way, Neil states that they will arrive sooner than expected while Nike recalls the teachings of her granny. She used to imitate her sister's singing, but the granny taught her to find her own voice and take pride in what she does. At night, Livius asks her why she didn't mention the letter when it arrived, and she states that she didn't want to create a fuss over it since his hands were already filled with the conference. He says that she doesn't have to bear everything on her own and that her husband is there so she can share her pain. She then asks how he noticed that the rain was different, and he says that their feelings did not align in the conference, and they must if the rain is to reach a person's heart. After he expresses his love for Nike, she embraces him and thanks him for being so kind to her. Later, when they arrive at the Principality of Rain, Neil asks Livius to be on guard since this country contains many unknowns. Just then, Kara greets his sister and the company, and her blunt attitude surprises both Livius and Neil. She then asks about the granny and quickly learns that it was merely her back that gave out from her country tour and that she is now alright, especially after seeing her granddaughter. She then introduces herself as Tohara and claims that she wanted to meet the Sun King in person. Just then, Mila and Nir arrive eagerly to meet the Sun King and mistake Neil for him. However, when Nike introduces them to the real Sun King, they start treating him as a child and take him with them to dress him up. Tohara asks Nike to show Neil around the place, and as soon as she leaves, her cousin Kidora, who was hiding on purpose, comes out of concealment. He claims to be shocked at the Sun King's age, but Tohara states that there is no childlike innocence in Livius. In a shocking turn of events, Kidora states that Livius will not return home with Nike as he is going to claim her instead. I sense a one-sided love story here. Meanwhile, after getting tortured by Nike's sisters, both Neil and Livius claim to have terrible headaches, which is mainly due to the lower air pressure. Livius orders Neil to send the retainers back to the ship and asks them to wait in the open sea for a while. As he rests in his room, Kara approaches Nike and reveals that they have planned a banquet for the king. She reveals that it might be difficult since he is sick, and Kara leaves by saying that she will order to cancel the party. After resting, Livius wakes up at night feeling much better and walks to his balcony, only to be astonished at the clear sky decorated with millions of stars. Just then, Nike arrives with rice porridge and reveals that his family is singing songs to remove clouds so he can see the true beauty of the sky. He tries the dish and enjoys the taste, which makes Nike happy as there is at least one thing he likes about his country. He says that he feels gratitude towards this place since it gave him a partner that he loves so dearly, which prompts her to embrace her as her cousin Kittery watches from afar in jealousy. The next day, everyone is busy preparing the banquet for the king, and all Nike can think about is last night when she kissed Livius. She decides to enter his room to address it but finds him fully naked and feels even more embarrassed. He says he went out on a walk but got soaked in the rain, and Nike hesitantly suggests that they go on a walk together with a proper rain umbrella. Outside, Nike explains the working of an umbrella. It's really complicated rocket science, so I won't explain. Nike is still embarrassed about the kiss and is unable to continue the conversation, so Livius holds her hand and the two continue walking in the rain. He then apologizes for threatening to burn his country to ashes and claims to love the fact that she is much closer to him here. Back in the Sun Kingdom, she seems so free that sometimes he thinks Nike would fly away, which is heartbreaking for him. However, in this rain, she feels so approachable, and it is like there is no one but them in the whole world. Just then, Kidora appears in front of them, and even though Nike is excited to see him, he keeps a serious look on his face and formally bows to the king. He then reveals that he was taking the Duke out for a walk, which makes the couple realize that they have not even greeted Nike's father Tedder ever since they came here. Inside, Livius and Tedder formally greet each other and Livy apologies for forgetting about him. The two get to talking and Tedder reveals that it is in fact Tohara who controls matters in the principality. She was around the same age as Livius when she took the throne, and at that time, the world was suffering from drought. Others wanted to avail this offer and expand their lands outside, but she was smart and cut down any ties with the outer world. This is how she managed to protect their homeland and prevent its powers from getting mixed up in ugly wars. Tohara is firm and righteous in her actions, but Tedder in her absence did something she did not approve of, which is to send Nike off to get married to the Sun King. Just then, Kara passes by doing her chores and asks Nike to help around the house. As she leaves with Kidora, Tedder reveals that the kid lost his parents when he was a child and Tohara raised both Nike and him together. Livius asks about Nike's real mother and Tedder mentions that she is sick and bedridden for a while. He further reveals how Nike and Kidora could not make it rain at first and he used to think that it might remain that way forever. However, due to her own dedication and her grandmother's intense training, she surpassed everyone and became the best singer in the whole country. Her persistence was commendable for Kidora, who developed a sense of admiration for her. At night, Kara begins the banquet with a concert and Nia and Mila are embarrassed as they have to follow after her performance. Meanwhile, Kotaro recalls his childhood memories with Nike and it is evident from that he has developed feelings for her. He calls her somewhere private in the house and sternly asks her if she is okay with getting married off to a stranger like this. He asks if she loves the king since she feels like a plaything, to which she replies that at first she was one but slowly she and Livia started bonding. Kidora thinks Nike is only being a motherly figure for him and the two start arguing until he uses an incense to render her unconscious. As he carries her in his arms, it is revealed that Tohara and he have collaborated on this plan to get rid of the Sun King. Later, Livius is informed about Nike's sickness and is kept from seeing her because he is not immune to the disease she has got. It will take her a month to recover and Livius cannot stay for such a long amount of time. However, it is all a lie and Nike is being held prisoner at the Black Lotus Tower, a prison that uses a barrier to cut off the powers of anyone held inside. Kidora tells her that she will be kept here until everything is over and she asks what he means by that. He reveals his plan to hypnotize the king slowly in the span of 3 days so he has a change of heart and calls off the engagement. However, if she sees him during this time, the spell will be broken, hence she needs to stay here. He also reveals that it was Tohara's plan as she wants her to stay here and protect their secret art from spreading to the world. Meanwhile, Ohara's nephew Aki offers Livius tea with sleep medicine and states to Mila that he will start hypnosis soon. However, she finds it cowardly to tear the two apart like this but cannot meddle as they can't oppose Tohara. As he approaches a sound asleep Livius to perform his spell, he wakes up immediately and reveals that he did not taste even a sip of what he gave him. Aki calls upon the guards, and while Neil distracts them, Livius uses this opportunity to escape where he meets Kara. Kara takes her to the secret passage that leads to the Black Lotus Tower, but he will need Tohara's special key to access it. Upon reaching the tower, Livy learns that Tohara is already there waiting for him, and she learns that Livy knew from the very start that something fishy is going on. Afterward, Tohara throws the key inside the swamp and says she will not give Nike up. She does not want the world to use her powers for their own benefit, but as Livy jumps into the swamp, he claims that he only cares about the present and that he always gets what he wants. He says that she is his woman and he will do everything to have her, prompting Granny to use her powers to stop him from finding the key. However, she says that if he finds the key, he will be allowed to take Nike back with her. As Nike tries her best to use her powers inside the cell, Livy is exhausted due to his search for the key but refuses to give up as a future with Nike is the only that keeps him going. Meanwhile, Nike tries to force open the prison cell with her physical strength to the point that she starts bleeding. She admits that Granny's worries are rightly placed but says that he cannot think of a future with Livy. She says she loves him for the first time and wants to be with him even if it means opposing her whole family. Kidora realizes that Nike actually loves Livius and sets her free, but before she leaves, he covers her head wound and gives her a key that can open the gate only from the inside. Outside, she reunited with Kara, who gives her the update, and she runs to the swamp to find Livy lying down with his heart stopped. She performs CPR with tears in her eyes and brings him back to life. As he gets up, happy to see Nike safe and sound, he pulls out the key from his pocket, declaring his win over Tohara. Later, the sisters apologize to Livy and state that they will accept any punishment, but he says that it was only a quarrel between family members and there is no need for that. 2 days later, Nike is running around the house looking for Livy and finds him sitting atop a tree trunk. He claims that he could see the ocean from here, and Nike climbs up the tree to share a wholesome moment with him. However, they get interrupted by Neil, who is furious as Livy should still be resting in his bed. He informs Nike that she has been summoned by her family, and as he leaves with her, Livy is somewhat abducted by a cloaked lady, who later reveals herself to be Lady Araha, Princess Nike's mother. She reveals that the people of this country once destroyed 3 countries overnight using the power of the rain. But that power is only gifted to the greatest singer among them. Nike happens to be the bearer of this power, and holding her in the Sun Kingdom can cause disasters if it gets out of control. She suggests that Nike stays here in the Principality of Rain, but Livy sternly refuses and reasons that this country is weak and is incapable of protecting her, whereas the Sun Kingdom rules over the world where her protection is guaranteed. Araha agrees and shows him a dress she made by hand for him, revealing that they are going to arrange a humbled wedding ceremony for their daughter. Meanwhile, Nike is being dressed up as well, and Livy is at a loss for words when he sees her in the wedding dress. Lady Araha is delighted to see her daughter so delighted and leaves the two to spend some time with each other. As she leaves, Nike reveals that Araha suffered severe damage to her body after she was born, rendering her unable to call the rain. Livius asks her not to be so sad as it doesn't do justice to the beauty that she holds. Later, during the ceremony, there is a lot of laughter, singing, and dancing until one of the locals expresses his wish to hear a few words from the groom. After some laughs, Livius states that he never felt like family with anyone except his mother Sheila, but Nike gave her a new perspective in life and he will protect her and keep her happy. He kisses her in front of the crowd and embarrasses her, and sometime later, Nike finds out that Tohara and Kidora have not attended their wedding. After the ceremony, Livy finds Kidora and makes him realize that it is cowardly of him to love someone for nearly 10 years and never express it even when given the chance. This infuriates Kidora, who threatens to push Livy off the cliff, but seeing no fear in his eyes, he steps back and says that he will come and kill him if he ever makes her cry. He then reveals how despite spending his entire childhood with Nike, he could never reach her as her interests lay somewhere else. And in a shocking turn of events, Livy reveals that he feels the same way about her. Just then, Nike arrives looking for Livius, who leaves immediately and hints Kidora to speak his heart out to her. The day of their departure arrives, and Nike visits her grandmother to say goodbye. However, she refuses to see her and Nike returns with a grim look on her face. On her way, she stumbles upon Livy, who convinces her to go back in there and say everything she wants to, since the granny is only avoiding the pain by refusing to see her. As the two run to her dorm, Tohara recalls how troublesome Nike was as a child, but her thoughts are interrupted when she finds Livy and Nike sneaking into her dorm. She runs inside, locking the door behind her back, and Nike decides to say her parting words there and then. She recalls how Gran told her to find her truth and says that she is going to leave on her will, unlike the first time. She further reveals how she has grown to love singing even more ever since she met Livy, and he is the one who brings out the best in her. Livy is Nike's truth and she wants to spend a lifetime with him. As she runs away with tears in her eyes, Livy mocks her for not facing her granddaughter and says that the next time might be too late, as it is too late for the person he wants to see the most. As they board the ship and sail for the Sun Kingdom, Nike says she has no regrets as she said what needed to be said. Just then, she hears singing in the distance and finds her granny atop a hill, sending rain down farewell rain the sky to her beloved granddaughter. Nike, sorrowed by her departure, cries her eyes out as she remembers her childhood with Tohara. Sometime later, the two arrive in the Sun Kingdom and Livius is furious at Bard as his court is filled with dozens of women. However, he is annoyed by the fact that everyone, including the elders, is siding with Bard, claiming that he has been running the affairs smoothly and the women are only here so he doesn't get bored. However, their duties resume right after their return, and Livius is still up at night with loads of work. The next morning, Nike is saddened by not having Livy at her bedside, whereas he is still busy dealing with the country's affairs. A few days pass and the couple still hasn't managed to make time for each other, which is making Nike more lonely than ever. However, Livy is only following the same schedule as he did before their trip to her homeland, and it is she who has developed immense love for the king. Just then, Bard startles her by appearing out of nowhere and states that she can talk to him about her misery. He then assures her that this loneliness only means that she has found someone without whom the world feels incomplete. However, this does not solve the issue, and even the staff notices how sad she has become ever since she came back. Hence, the head chef Jaina devises a plan and asks Nike to serve food to Livius since he himself is too busy. However, the plan fails as Livy is on a tour, so Nike leaves with a smile masking her sorrow. Unable to control her sadness, she starts singing and big rain clouds cover the castle. Soon, it starts to rain and sorrow covers the entire Sun Kingdom, and Nike's heart longs for her beloved. The next day, as she awaits his return in a place he had told her about behind the castle, she states how her songs have become much stronger due to the immense desire to meet Livius. As the dew sparkles the grassy field, Livius arrives on a white horse and both of them are shocked and delighted to see each other after so many days. As they lie in the grass together, he reveals that he sneaked out early in the morning as his heart longed to see Nike, and his intuition told him that he will find her here. As he expresses how painful it was for him to not see her, she ends with the two embracing each other. That's all for today. If you enjoyed our video, give us a like and subscribe to our channel to never miss an update from us.